It was Friday, November 11th, 2016. Just 3 days after what was, at the time, the most contentious election any of us could remember. As the assistant rabbi serving a congregation in Milwaukee, I was particularly ready for Shabbat to come. Living in a place that was more divided than any of us had grasped before that week, I was ready to embrace the peace of Shabbat. And happily, this Shabbat, the congregation in Milwaukee would be hosting a scholar in residence who would offer the sermon during Friday night services. When it came time for the scholar to share his sermon, I settled into my seat, waiting to be enlightened. Anti-Semitism, he began, is no longer a problem. Did I hear him correctly? Did this scholar, a history and political science professor at one of the local universities, who also happened to be a well-respected member of the Jewish community, just tell us on November 11th, 2016, that anti-Semitism was no longer an issue? He went on, suggesting that Americans have fully and completely embraced Jews in all facets of society. He added the caveat that there would always be hateful individuals on the fringes, but by and large, he declared, the threat of widespread anti-Semitism no longer existed here in America. This was not the sense of Shabbat peace I was hoping for. I felt a pit forming in my stomach because even though I wanted so badly to believe this professor, this respected academic and leader in the community, I wanted to believe that he was right. I knew deep in my kishkis that he was very wrong. A few months prior, in the lead up to that November 2016 election, I met with 10th grade confirmation students at Congregation Shalom in Milwaukee. Each year, I survey the confirmation students to find out exactly what is on their minds, what topics they're hoping to cover to help deepen their connection with Judaism, with Jewish thought and Jewish practice. I expect the students to ask me about Jewish views on bioethics, or about the parts of the tradition that are, let's say, for more mature ears. So this particular year, when I posed the question, a girl who was otherwise a quiet student shot her hand up in the air. I want to learn how to deal with anti-Semitism, she stated plainly. I glanced around the room, expecting the other students to be puzzled or surprised even. Instead, the other students nodded in agreement. And one by one, they offered their personal experiences encountering anti-Semitism in Wisconsin over the past year. Experiences ranging from finding a swastika on one of their lockers, to being on the receiving end of derogatory comments from classmates, teachers, and coaches. How I wished I could protect these dear students of mine. I wished I could form some kind of protective barrier around them so that they could be shielded from this terrible hatred. I wished that they could be growing up in a simpler, more accepting time. The truth, as we all know, is that our country has changed significantly in the past decades. The Anti-Defamation League, commonly known as the ADL, describes itself as the leading anti-hate organization in the world. The ADL, along with the FBI, keep close record of anti-Semitism here in the United States. Here are some painful statistics that paint a picture of how American anti-Semitism has evolved in recent years. Though making up only 2% of the country's population, Jews are consistently the most targeted religious community in the United States. Since 2016, Jews in the United States have been the targets of at least 21 extremist plots or credible threats. In the year 2021, 2,717 incidents of assault, harassment, and vandalism were reported to the ADL, representing an all-time high in our country. Let me be clear, this is not normal. This number represents an average of 7 incidents per day, which equals a 34% increase year over year since the ADL began keeping track of anti-Semitic incidents back in 1979. But we don't really need these statistics to tell us that the professor was wrong. We have witnessed firsthand a kind of hatred that used to hide in the shadows. It's on display now for all the world to see. We've seen it in Charlottesville, in Pittsburgh, Poway, Muncie, and Colleyville. These memories, so raw and so fresh, point to something far more disturbing than lone actors on the fringes of society. Classic anti-Semitism isn't ever really fueled by hatred alone. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Zichrono Livracha, illustrates this difficult truth with a dark joke. The year is 1933. 2 Jews are sitting in a Viennese coffee house reading the news. One is reading the local Jewish paper, the other, the notoriously anti-Semitic publication, Der Stürmer. "How can you possibly read that revolting rubbish?" says the first. The second smiles. "What does your paper say?" "Let me tell you, the Jews are assimilating, the Jews are arguing, the Jews are disappearing. Now let me tell you what my paper says. The Jews control the banks, the Jews control the media, the Jews control Austria, the Jews control the world. My friend, if you want good news about the Jews, always read the Anti-Semites." Today, we need not obtain an anti-Semitic newspaper. At our fingertips, a simple search of the internet yields incredibly dark results. You'll find conspiracy theories claiming that Jews control the banks, the media, and the government. You'll also find that Jews are behind the climate change hoax. You'll find conspiracy theories such as the Great Replacement Theory, which claim that the Jews lead an intentional effort to promote mass immigration, intermarriage, and other efforts leading to the extinction of whites. Then you'll find the dog whistle conspiracy theories, blaming George Soros for Antifa, the COVID pandemic, and for orchestrating the death of George Floyd, alav hashalom. And you'll find dog whistle conspiracy theories from people who hold high public offices, such as Georgia's 14th Congressional District Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who claimed that the 2018 California wildfires were ignited by a space laser controlled by a corporate cabal, including the Rothschild banking firm. These contemporary conspiracy theories, the ones that today are hiding in plain sight with just a click of the finger on the phones we keep in our pockets, are not so different from the ones that have been lodged against Jews for thousands of years. Blood libels, scapegoating the Jews for diseases like the Black Plague, and the perennially popular pamphlet, The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. The list goes on. At this point, you might be thinking, this is troubling, but it's not actually news to us. We know that anti-Semitism is a serious problem on the right. But anti-Semitism isn't limited to the right. And it's not limited to places in our country like Wisconsin. Over this past year here at Temple Beth Israel, our teens experienced difficulties at school. Some were part of an Israel club that was pressured to change its name to the Jewish Club so as to be less offensive. Others were made to feel that they had to check their Zionism at the door in order to fit into LGBTQIA spaces, anti-racist spaces, and other social justice spaces. Here in Skokie, I encountered a parent who wasn't sure what to do, as the Israeli flag seemed to be the only one missing from a classroom display of international flags representing the students' heritage and nationalities at her child's elementary school. This mother thought it was odd, given that there were both Jewish and Israeli children at the school. And though this mother was not looking to make waves, she also didn't want her child to be ashamed of his Jewish identity. How I wish I could protect these students of ours here at TBI. I wish I could form some kind of protective barrier around them so that they could be shielded from these harmful views. The anti-Semitism that I hear about here in Skokie, from your experiences, as opposed to the anti-Semitism that the folks in Milwaukee experienced, comes mostly from the left. This anti-Semitism feels more insidious than anti-Semitism on the right. This anti-Semitism often hides behind the veil of criticism towards Israel. Let me be clear. Not all criticism against Israel is anti-Semitism. I want to say that again. Not all criticism against Israel is anti-Semitism. It is certainly appropriate for us as Jews and for any of our fellow Americans to question the Israeli government in the same way that we might question our own American government or the government of any of our nation's allies. There is a difference, however, between legitimate criticism of government policies and anti-Semitism. When Israel is singled out and held to a different set of standards, and its very existence is called into question, that is anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism on the left often follows the logic that either you are against oppression everywhere, or you are one of the oppressors. Many on the left view Israel as the very worst contemporary oppressive force. Worse than Iran, worse than Syria, worse than North Korea, worse than Russia. They hold up Israel as the paradigmatic example of the ill effects of 20th century colonialism or contemporary American imperialism. Increasingly on the left, the world is divided into binary camps based on identities. Either you are part of an oppressed class and therefore one of the good guys, or you are part of an oppressing class and therefore are one of the bad guys. In this binary view, nuance becomes nothing more than collateral damage. Professor Deborah E. Lipstadt reminds us of an incident that was captured on YouTube in March of 2015 at UCLA. Rachel Beda, a well-qualified candidate for a position on the Student Council's judicial board, was initially rejected by a majority of her peers who served on the council because they assumed that as an active member of the Jewish community, she would not be able to deal with governance questions in an unbiased way. Ultimately, this decision was overturned and the students on the council apologized publicly. However, the UCLA students' initial decision reflect a sentiment that Jews are members of the elite and therefore can be neither fair-minded nor the victims of discrimination. Here in real time, on display, a group of well-meaning students categorized all Jews as the bad guys. In her book, How to Fight Anti-Semitism, journalist Barry Weiss asks, is the anti-Semitism that posits Jews are capitalists who control the world different from the one that posits that they are evil communists who control the world? Is the anti-Semitism that insists that Jews connive and exploit Gentile power different from the one that insists that they connive and exploit their own state power? Is the anti-Semitism that says that Jews are secret betrayers of the white race different from the anti-Semitism that says they are secret white supremacists? Is the anti-Semitism that forces us to designate ourselves publicly with Jewish stars different from the anti-Semitism that insists we must not? In other words, in America, is the anti-Semitism that we endure from the left so different at its core from the anti-Semitism we endure from the right? This year, in the days following the hostage situation at Temple Beth Israel, a Reform synagogue in Colleyville, Texas, Yair Rosenberg published a piece in The Atlantic titled, why so many people still don't understand anti-Semitism. Rosenberg writes, "After the intruder pulled a gun on the congregation, he demanded to speak to the rabbi of New York's Central Synagogue, who he claimed could authorize the release of a Pakistani woman serving an attempted murder sentence in a Fort Worth facility near the synagogue. Obviously, this is not how the prison system works. But this intruder believed in the conspiracy that Jews control the world, that Rabbi Citron Walker in Colleyville, Texas, could call Rabbi Buchdahl in New York, and that with a simple phone call, she could get a prisoner released. The shooter at the Tree of Life synagogue also believed in a conspiracy theory. He believed that the Jews were to blame for the shifting racial demographics here in the United States, and he believed that the Jews had to be stopped. And the students at UCLA, they too believed in a conspiracy theory, that Jews could not possibly be fair-minded on account of their dual loyalty. Anti-Semitism on the right and on the left can usually be traced back to conspiratorial thinking at its core. This kind of thinking is not only deeply dangerous for Jews, but is deeply dangerous for American democracy. So what are we to do? One instinctive answer is to build protective barriers. Just as my instinct was to protect my students, our community moves quickly responding to our deepest fears, working to physically reinforce our Jewish communal spaces, including, yes, our synagogue. We can and we should be vigilant about our physical safety, but this response treats the symptoms alone rather than treating the cause of the disease of American anti-Semitism. In order to treat the cause, we need to focus not only on building barriers, but also on building bridges. We need to build bridges between our neighbors and ourselves. We need to reach out and be in relationship with those who are different from us. We need to be involved as proud Jews in all aspects of civic life here in our wider community. Even more critical, this means that we need to be in authentic relationship with those with whom we have real differences. Even though the disease of American anti-Semitism is not yet under control, there is still good reason to believe in the potential of this country's promise. Because after Charlottesville and Pittsburgh and Poway and Muncie and Colleyville, our neighbors have consistently shown up for us. They have consistently reminded us that we are not alone. The best way to combat anti-Semitism here in our country is not only to build the bridges to our neighbors, but to walk across those bridges, bringing our whole selves into every difficult conversation, every just cause, every decent corner of our country. In this way, our neighbors get to really know us, and we get to really know them. When we build bridges and regularly walk across them, meeting our neighbors where they are, we position ourselves to be able to take a stand wherever hate rears its head, and in that process, we make it easier for our neighbors to do the same. This takes work. This means supporting our Muslim brothers and our Asian sisters. It means fighting systemic racism and protecting the hard-earned civil rights that are now under assault from members of the LGBTQIA community. This also means building bridges towards those across the political aisle, those whose socioeconomic reality differs from our own, those who voted for the candidate we didn't pick in the last election. Sometimes this is hard. There are painful complexities and real differences that might prevent us from showing up fully as our Jewish selves. But the stakes are too high to walk away. For our own sake and for the sake of this country, we have to build the bridges and walk with our whole selves across them. Tonight we embark on a journey of deep introspection during these Yamim Noraim, using our tradition and our sacred text as our guide. At the pinnacle of these days, we read from the Holiness Code, and the pinnacle of the Holiness Code implores us with our most sacred commandment, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, to love our neighbor as ourselves. I don't have all the answers. What I do know is that even though we sit in a densely Jewish, open-minded urban center, we are not immune to the effects of American anti-Semitism. If we want our children to grow up in a world that is better than the one that exists today, then we need to acknowledge this serious problem and work together to build bridges of understanding, to build bridges of community, to build bridges of love.